This is an open letter to Miss or Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. Something, something, something. Ocasio-Cortez. Anyway, Alexandria. Okay, here's the thing. Bravo, ma'am. You have reached high places in very short time. So you have been full effort. Bravo. So you get an A for effort. But the problem is, ma'am, the problem is you have gone native. And if you follow the steps back, how does one go native is when one becomes very impressed. You kind of fall in line, and you're no longer your own person when you go native. You go native when you become impressed. You go to a country, you meet a new religion. If you're very much impressed by them, you become of that religion and say, hey, obviously these guys are following a good rule book or very important, something that has made the society work so well. So maybe I convert to this religion. So maybe my society, I would be part of this very well-run society. So you convert. This used to be the case on your planet. So you convert into something that works better, right? So that's how you go native. When you convert to the religion of the majority of the tribe, that's how you go native. But in order to do that, you have to be impressed first. Now, the problem with going from the bar, as a bar maiden you were, apparently, as the problem for a while, short while, you're obviously very smart, but you are, came from very humble beginnings to Washington, halls of power in Washington D.C. You see the problem with that democracy always has to deal with. The problem with that is that you get impressed quite easily. You become quite impressed quite easily. A lot impresses you. You see what I'm saying? When a lot impresses you, you go native real fast. You see, when you come from humble beginnings, when you enter halls of power which comes with a lot of money and influence and power, and when you are associated with those halls, as soon as you become associated with halls of power and all the wealth that comes from it, you will become very much impressed. So impressed that you will serve your own mother to continue being impressed and being embraced by the higher up in the hierarchy of which is capitalism / democracy that you have built. The problem is that when you get too much as soon as you get impressed, you sell out. You go native. You get impressed, and you convert to the religion of the natives and the religion of your tribe. It's called Democratic Party. Is a religion, right? And I say it's religion is because it changes, but it changes very slowly over time. That's how religions are. It's a way of life, and have you seen this shit show that in the Middle East, still some countries trying to enforce some kind of a very old idea into newer generations, with regards to treatment of women, blah, 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 blah. But still, they should be left alone. They should not be forced change, because forced change doesn't help anybody, even the women. They have to be left alone. But what I was trying to, express is that obviously these parties, these political parties that you have, these political parties have become sort of like religions, because they're so rigid. It's sort of like if we, for example, that they're so rigid that if we lose an election fully, totally, even if we lose the election, everything, and our pants and then some, if we lose everything, still we're not going to change the leader. That's a religion. When people, commit mass suicide, if following this guy means death, I'm willing to do it. That's a religion. If every one of us loses an election following this religion, the Democratic Manifesto, or Democratic, I'm sorry, did I say Democratic Manifesto? You don't have one. The Democratic Party Manifesto, if we don't step one step away from it, we forget about 180-degree turn. We are not going to even do a 90-degree turn. We're just going to continue with the same leadership. I thought you're not going to change your manifesto. At least you're going to change your leaders. I read that you're not even changing your leaders, apparently. So, are you kidding me? That's a religion. When even if the book fails, you're not going to change the book, you're not going to change the prophet, you're not going to go another way, you're not going to convert to somebody else's religion. We're going to stick with our religion, even if it means, our house burns down on top of our head. That's the situation with Israelis. We're going to, that's a religion, apparently it's the last theocracy in the world is Israel. For your information, considering that the Saudis and the Iranians have both moved away somewhat from religion, and thank God for that, it seems the last theocracy is Israel. The whole spiel about it is the spiel about Israel is the Jewish state of Israel, right? So that means they're literally putting the name of the actually they have to call it the Ashkenazi, not a Jewish state of Israel, but Ashkenazi state of Israel. Seriously, that's part of the manifesto of the Democratic Party. Even if that Ashkenazi state of Israel, even if they're killing a whole lot of bunch of people, brown people who are native to that fucking land, they're killing them. But the problem is you have gone native, Miss Ocasio-Cortez. You have gone native because you came from very humble beginnings, humble background. Now you go to a skiff, a very important place. We bug check this place 50 times a day, and you only have the access to this. You and your 5 house friends have access to this very important information. That's invigorating, sort of like I am chosen by these people to represent them, and I came here from the bar. Now a lot impresses you. A lot impresses you. Here's my advice, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez. Every morning before you go to work in the Capitol Hill, watch a haka, the recent haka of that was in November 2024. The recent haka of the a young representative woman from New Zealand who basically did a haka and gave the middle finger to the colonialist people and said, I am not impressed. You see what I'm saying? I suggest that you see that and not worry about no longer losing your seat, because that's the thing. When you get impressed, you don't want to lose your impressive position. At which point you are willing to sell your mother, sister, brother, whatever, other brown people, black people around the world for not much money, because you're very much impressed. You see, but the thing with somebody like Donald Trump is that he's not impressed by Washington D.C. There is nothing the senators and the representatives have done in terms of with money and power, killing Epstein in the prison kind of power. There is nothing that had, that Washington has that would impress a very rich New York guy. So what? You see what I'm saying? So this guy probably could be the savior, because nothing much. He's not impressed by much. He's already seen it. He's got a long, very rich, very sordid, very rich life in New York City, and he's seen it all. And that means he can't not go native. That means basically not going native. It seems, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, you have gone native in terms of you pretty much stopped talking with regards to, having Puerto Rico as the 51st state. Why aren't you talking about that? Why aren't you talking about other brown people getting killed? I mean, you watch the haka of that girl every morning and understand that this is your position, because they're not going to recognize your right until you're right up in their face. They're not going to recognize anybody's right. The British have shown, the British mentality, the Anglo-Saxon mentality has shown that wherever they could invade and oppress and suppress and subdue the natives, they have done so. Should I repeat? The history tells this didn't happen with the Chinese. The Chinese came up with the concept of a ship a long time ago, and going to sea and voyages a long time ago, but they never decided that we're going to land an army in Malaysia and take over Malaysia. They didn't do that because that's not a thing. There's enough land in China for whoever the fuck wants to live there. There are a lot of inlands that are very cheap. You'll be isolated, but it's very cheap. They didn't have this need of the Anglo-Saxon, the British in specific, which that mind virus has crossed the Atlantic and now has become the New York and Washington mind virus, that nothing is enough. We have to control everything ourselves militarily. If that means subduing the native by force, we will do so. And you going along with that, with regards to West Asia, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. If you remain quiet about that, because you are impressed, you're in presence of a lot of power and a lot of wealth, so now you're very impressed. Now you don't want to leave your seat. You are in love with your seat in the House of Representatives. Therefore, you're willing to go with almost anything, apparently. You see, this is where term limits are important. In fact, I think one of the best ideas that he has, Trump, if he can force it through, is term limits. Term limits, period. Because even with term limits, if there is term limit, people like you will go in, thank God for that, people like you from humble background will go in. It's a well-paying job for what you have to do, so if people think they can get in, if there is a term limit, and people think they can get in, they go in, they do what you did for the first term or second term, and because they already know there is an expiration date, so they will not go native. This is what I'm trying to say. The cure for democracy is term limits before the to prevent people from going native. You see what I'm saying? Term limits keeps people on their toes and true to their cause, because they know there is an exit day, that they're going to, or they already know they're going to lose their special access to information, wealth, whatever. They're going to lose their special access at a specific date, which means they're not going to go native wherever they're from. Whether you're Thomas Massey of Kentucky and Ocasio-Cortez, if you have term limits, you will remain true to your cause. Without term limits, you won't remain true to your cause. You eventually go native. Especially if you're coming from a very humble background, which what you need in a democracy, people from humble backgrounds in high places, but with term limits. Because if no term limits, these people from humble backgrounds, such as yourself, will go native, and then you will fall in love with your seat, and then for the protection of your seat with the help of the party, to protect your seat with the help of the party, you will go native, i.e. you will convert to that religion. And the religion of Democratic Party has, like all religions, have changed over time. From Woodstock, now the Democratic Party is somehow in their religious texts, there's this idea of Woodstock in Israel. Woodstock in Israel, under what, in a gated community in Asia for white people, a gated community of white people in Asia. What I'm trying to say is, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, your complexion is brown. You're brown. Why don't you take a trip to Egypt? Maybe Syria. Here's the thing. Your party criticizes Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard, I'm not sure. Sorry if I pronounce it wrong. Your party has started criticizing Tulsi Gabbard, and I saw you the other day saying something like, "Oh, Tulsi Gabbard is a warmonger. We are not warmongers." This apparently I saw coming out of your mouth. If this was AI generated, I'm sorry for the whole thing. As far as we know, this came out of your mouth. And I'm thinking to myself that she didn't say that, did she? Here's the thing, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, you are, by going over there, you show responsibility. Where your vote for the budget that goes for the military, you go and see the result of. You have to go and see the result of that work. This work of expansion of the empire, this work of subduing the native, which is a very English mindset, that mainlanders don't have that kind of a mindset. The British have, and now that kind of mindset has been transferred to North America, into both parties. That's why Donald Trump won twice. Both parties have this British idea of, we have to go and subdue the natives and rule them, because them motherfuckers don't know how to rule themselves. And we're gonna rule them, and then we're gonna charge them for ruling them. We're gonna charge them for ruling them, and then if they don't pay the charge, we're going to attack them. Iraqis were not willing to pay. They were subdued by Uncle Sam's managers, then they rose up, they still got subdued, they rose up, they changed leadership. The last one didn't want to bend the knee after many years of bending the knee. He didn't want to bend the knee anymore, and suddenly he became the bad guy. In his whole idea, Saddam Hussein, in his whole life, Saddam Hussein had one good idea, and that is taking over Kuwait. because those borders over there were put together by the British. Iraq, if you study the map, does not, the British did not include a warm water port when they created Iraq. Let me repeat that again. One of the oldest civilizations on your planet is in Iraq, and when the British divided the Ottoman Empire, they created Iraq, which containing one of the oldest civilizations on your planet. They did not provide Iraq on the map a warm water port. It's a piece of swampland. It's basically their port is a river. You are 30, 40 million people. You put in a country with 30, 40 million people, and there is an access point to the Persian Gulf, but that's Kuwait. You just cut off Kuwait and you say, this is a different country. Have you been there? Have you noticed this? And the one good idea that Saddam had, then executed, and suddenly he was the bad guy. No, you shouldn't have warm water ports. We told you, you can only have a river access to the Persian Gulf. No warm water ports for you. No soup for you. And then because they did this, a logical action, one logical action he did, but it was against your interest. Whose interest? Well, those people that you're very impressed by right now, those people that you're impressed by, those people. And actually not those people, the people they work for, and those are, the 10%, maybe even the 5% upper echelon of the pink skin society, who are British descendants, different branches of Anglo-Saxons. But it's white people from Europe own all the corporations that are working, so they make the upper crust of the society 10% of white people. That's the thing. It's not all white people. It's 10% of white people who own everything in North America and most of Europe. The other 90% of white people are all, cannon fodder like me and I. So this is die or D. My point is this. We are all cannon fodder for the upper 10%, upper 5%, upper echelon of the Anglo-Saxon society, with their specific mindset of having to subdue all the natives all the time, because this is what we do. Because to create, security. Yeah, you can create security if you send a, police officer to stand guard at my house. You can create security, and you can also create discomfort. I don't want your officer up my ass. You see what I'm saying? Just like Saddam doesn't want, a CIA office up his ass in Baghdad, and nor military base, nor any of corporations which are cutting most of the fat out of it. And now that they actually have to, the money from the oil that they sell in the land that apparently they don't own, because the oil is said in the land apparently the Iraqis don't own. Who owns this land? The guys who are receiving the money for its resources. Where are they? In New York City. This is an imperial act. We took over this land. Now the oil that sells comes to New York City, and then those people who are running the land on our behalf, you're basically, Uncle Sam's managers now own Iraq, and they have leased it back to its residents. The residents have to work, do whatever shit they do. The major money that comes in from the resources that this land has, oil, goes to a New York bank account, and then these people have to send invoices in order to get some of that money to spend it on their land. I call that leasing the land. The owners have changed. There were Iraqis owned Iraq, people of West Asia owned Iraq, Now people who own Iraq are in New York City. And the same people are now financing a war in Israel and a war in Ukraine. These wars are financed. Somebody's paying this money. Who is allowing this money to be spent? And why are you agreeing with this money being spent in financing an invasion of the natives by the non-natives, supported by people who like to gamble and put money in these kind of ventures? I hear the name of BlackRock a lot. I hear a lot of names of very rich, powerful people who have apparently who are looking for interest, some real interest, some kind of like Iraq kind of interest, that now we own that land, and now the resources of that land, when it's sold, the money comes to a bank account in New York, maybe with JP Morgan Chase, and then from there, whoever we put there to rule that land, they will send an invoice to JP Morgan Chase, and JP Morgan Chase releases some of that money for the maintenance of that land. That's the empire, that's the pink skin empire. This is the Anglo-Saxon empire wanting to rule over another piece of land and get paid. They don't care for the fucking resources. The resources goes to an open market in the world. It's not that Iraqi oil doesn't, reach Texas. No, Iraqi oil is sold in the world, but the money that is relevant to the Iraqi oil goes to New York. You want to know who's financing this war? It seems the government is financing. But who's backing those people in the government who did make decisions to spend so much money in financing new wars? Government money in financing new wars. If you follow that, those people are working for the banks who have an interest in those wars. Joe Sixpack doesn't have my postman doesn't have an interest in any wars overseas. His income is not going to change. his income is not going to change whether a Korean buyer pays to a Iraqi bank or a New York bank the money, the credit that they have to pay for a tanker of oil. They don't care where they pay it, but you're forcing them to pay it to a New York bank account. I call that an imperial act. We own the whole shit. And then keeping the natives weak by bombing them every so often, and the whole neighborhood has to be weak because we got this little enclave, this little gated community of white people from Europe, and in order to keep these guys safe, the community of 4 million, 5 million of Europeans in Asia, in order to keep these guys safe, we're gonna bomb 500 million. We're gonna sanction, bomb, attack, assassinate, whatever we have to do with 500 million in North Africa and West Asia. We're gonna subdue all of them to protect this small 5 million Europeans in West Asia. That would be Israel. Well, that's just nonsense. That's not logical. And if you hadn't gone native, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, you would brought this subject up and say, hey, my term is going to end in 2 years, so I know I'm going to lose my access to your impressive setup here in Washington, D.C., but because my term limit is coming up, you may be impressed let's put it this way, in term limits, somebody from humble background who should be there, everybody from humble background should. When you make it a limited term, a lot of people get a chance to become representatives. and many of them for probably for first half, maybe for a short time in their limited representative time slot, some of them will become impressed very fast, but then when they're remembering that they have to actually go back to that bartending job, if there is a term limit, and if you think that you may actually have to return to that job, you will never go native. You say, nope, I'm here for 8 years, I'm here for 5 years, I have a lot of things on my mind that could work better, I'm going to work my ass off, and the pay is good, and I'm going to get to know everything, and I'm going to read everything, and I'm going to do as much change that I think necessary to make my environment better, that I need to make. And I'm going to agree with only things that with things that only make sense. I'm going to agree with things that really make sense. You're accusing Tulsi Gabbard of being pro-war, and Democratic Party, and I also heard many times on NPR that everybody is like, bad girl, she went and visited Assad of Syria, the country under attack from a bunch of lawmakers who are attacking Syria because JP Morgan Chase apparently has some interest in Syria that needs looking after, wants to have some interest in Syria. So some politicians are ordered to go after Syria. Okay, you really want to say this is a bad thing, going and meeting the natives on their land? Going and meeting the natives on their land is a bad thing. Why? Talking to the Russians is a bad thing. Why the fuck? They're natives. They're called Russians. They're living in Russia. They're natives. You're the outsider, and you're telling us that we don't want to talk to the natives. We just want to go in and bash them. Afghanistan? Salute. And because you have gone native, you don't speak up. If an asshole like me can understand this, I'm sure you can. But you have gone native. You see what I'm saying? You understand it, probably better than me, that, these are all wars these are banker wars, and we actually don't need, my constituencies don't have any interest in Ukraine or Israel. Let the Israelis, live amongst the Arabs if they want. We are not going to finance a gated community for a bunch of Ashkenazis from Europe in West Asia. We are not going to finance a very expensive financing. This is a very high maintenance gated community. Israel, you can describe it as a very high maintenance gated community. That's why it's very expensive. A very high maintenance gated community, it becomes the more maintenance it needs, security it needs, it becomes more expensive. You give Israelis an ultimatum. You say, melt into the population of the Arabs if you want to live in Israel. We're not going to finance a gated community. You have to open the gates and melt into the population, and yes, you're going to be in a minority. But if you still want to live on this land, you go ahead and live on this land, but you're going to be in a minority because this is not your land. This is called an Arabian Peninsula, and Ashkenazi folks are from Eastern Europe. Or whatever of them have moved to North America, now they're still Eastern European who are Ashkenazi, who are moving to Israel. You can say, yes, move to Israel if you like, but Israel has to open the doors, be a secular state. You can go live there, but you're going to be a minority amongst Arabs. If you don't like it, you don't live there, you go back to Poland. But if you're going to live there, you're going to be a minority. We are not going to finance a gated community of Israel with all kinds of military shit, and then we're not going to try to subdue 500 million Middle Easterners and North Africans, subdue them in order to protect this gated community. We're going to subdue 500 million people in order to protect 5 million people. I'm going to subdue this whole town because I decided to live in this town. Does that make sense? Does that make any kind of sense? Yeah, if I have help from aliens, I can subdue this town for myself. And that's what exactly Israelis are doing. They're subduing the whole neighborhood of West Asia and North Africa with the help of all the arms they're getting from Anglo-Saxons, Anglo-Saxon banks. 10% of the Anglo-Saxon society who owns everything wants these wars to continue, because at the end of it they're going to own the land, and they're going to sell its resources and collect its money. It doesn't get any more simple than that. The rest of it is, as Mr. Biden puts it, hogwash, horse manure. The rest of it is horse manure. Now you have become impressed, you have gone native, Mr. Ocasio-Cortez, because you want to keep your seat, because there are no term limits. So you have gone native because you really love your seat. So does Kim Kardashian. With a law degree. She loves her seat, and she has forced other people, the whole planet, to watch her seat and try to love her seat because her seat is special. Well, you think your seat is special too, and there is no term limit. So a girl from humble backgrounds have come in, but soon she has the democratic religion has won her heart over, and she has fallen in love with this new religion that the Democratic Party has morphed into, and war and protection of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase interests, and not protection of their interests, expansion of the bankers' interests. The same bank that is which bank? Find this out, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez. Which bank is collecting Iraqi money, oil money, in New York? That bank is probably the one who invested, who convinced the politician that they had helped elect. They are the ones who convinced those politicians to go for a war in Iraq. You see, the problem wasn't that Dick Cheney. The problem was Dick Cheney also comes from a very humble background. So does John McCain. That's why so many very corrupt people come from very humble background. The problem isn't that they shouldn't be there because they're from humble background. The problem is they get impressed and they sell out because they are from humble backgrounds. They get impressed easily and sell out to whatever the party position happens to be at that time. They come with principles, but they lose them soon after, because there are no term limits, and you have fallen in love with your seat in the parliament. You actually wrote a poem for yourself. You see where I'm going with this? That was also Dick Cheney. He loved the power. He was a line man. He was a man who was not for thinking, probably planning, but not. You wouldn't. Let's put it this way: Dick Cheney wouldn't qualify as a philosopher. He was a lineman. Because there are no term limits. Because with term limits, the people in charge of the party Mrs. Pelosi cannot be in charge of, could not have been in charge of a party for like 20, 30 years if there were term limits. You're out, you're out. Your term ends, you leave the party, you're no longer part of the ruling class of the party. But with term limits, these parties turn into religions. You can't change. Mrs. Pelosi's interest leads her down this path, and because she's allowed to follow that path for a lifetime, she doesn't need the need for any change. So suddenly you lose a big election, and then the party is so rigid, and they say, no, we're going to stay with the same prophets, we're going to stay with the same commandments, tablets, commandments. They're killing people, innocent people over there, and your commandments said, in the Democratic Party, your commandment is saying, and has been saying for the past year, that don't talk much about it, don't protest about it, shut the fuck up if you want to keep your seat. And you have gone native, and you have accepted that, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez. You have accepted that. We don't. It would make sense for past year that somebody would have done a haka in the House floor at least once a day to bring attention to the situation over there. You can learn how to do haka. Haka is basically calling bullshit. Haka is, I don't recognize you as my overlord. I am independent because I have a term limit. You see, but if you go a little down that road, if you believe there is an end day to your life, there is a term limit, you wouldn't be so greedy either. But that's a whole different story. My point is this. Please back up. Here's the thing. Nobody says that without term limits, nobody says every apple goes bad, but a lot do. And there are some, stellar personalities who have had none of it. No sweetheart deals with any lobbyist or any backers, or just following the party line in order to not to lose your seat. Not everybody follows that, but most people do. They come in, they go native because they fall in love with their seat, and they're willing to sell the family jewels in order to keep their seat. So again, I'm repeating, my problem is not people from humble background reaching high places. My problem is that without term limits, these people, because they're from humble backgrounds, they become impressed soon. They become impressed, and in order to not to lose their special access, their name, their identity, in order not to lose that privilege of being a representative, they will start towing the religion. You can't you can't be your own person and follow a religion, because every religion has a fucking manual. You can't be your own man, show judgment if you're following a manual. You either follow a manual or you show judgment. If there is term limits, you show judgment. You have principles. If there are no term limits, you start following the manual until the end of your life. And that's what has happened with a lot of these black leadership in the Senate and the House. House mostly, very few senators. In the House, the black leaders in the House, and they're all very, old, and they've been in the same job for as long as anybody can remember. But they have sold their soul long time ago. They have gone native long time ago because as soon as they landed, they got impressed. I mean, even white people, if Mrs. Greenie has a expiration date of this is how long she can stay as a representative, I think she's doing the way she's going about it. I'm not, I may not agree with what she has to say, but the way she's saying it is that, she feels that, there's a day that I don't want to do this anymore. I have better things to do in Georgia. So the thing is, if rich people find their way to these seats, they're also they find their way to these seats out of conviction, and humble people find it out of their way out to these seats out of frustration. You saw the situation in your neighborhood, and you were, so you, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez and Mrs. Greenie, have a lot in common. You both have come there with conviction. But Mrs. Greenie's conviction is sort of like, first of all, I don't want to be here all my life. I have better things to do in Georgia. I've just come here because I see the fucking thing is broken. And you have come in the same way. But now she's still her own woman. She says, no, I don't see any point in spending money in Ukraine for the benefit of JP Morgan Chase. Because they want to own another bank account. They own already the bank account of Iraq. Now they want to own the bank account of Ukraine. I don't see any point in that because that money doesn't go to me or Georgia or anybody else I know. So that's bullshit. She's calling BS. Mrs. Greenie is performing a haka every day in the house. The haka dance of New Zealanders. But you started performing hakas, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, when you first started. Then you got impressed. You became part of the sorority, and then you got impressed. First you got impressed, then you became part of the sorority. And now you have sold, brown people down the drain, and you're like, yeah, I'm okay with killing brown people. As long as I get to keep my seat, I'm okay with JP Morgan Chase financing killing brown people because JP Morgan Chase wants their resources. You see where I'm going with this? You wouldn't be okay with this if you had a term limit. You wouldn't, with the term limit, you already know, you're already going to leave the club. So you have a incentive to stick to your truth. The reason you went there. The reason you went there was because you saw that the services that these constituents were getting for the productivity that they were trying to provide to the society, you saw their services that they were getting is shit. So you got elected. You went in, but now you have gone native and say, I'm okay with sending money to Ukraine to, acquire some more property for JP Morgan Chase, but I'm not okay with spending money on my constituencies so they can learn how to read and write. That's called going native. If you had term limits, you knew one day, because you knew one day you have to go back and once again live amongst the muck. You help fix the muck. Clean up the muck. I need people around me to be able to read and write well, and like to read, and have higher intellect than they already do. For that purpose, I need to say no going to war on behalf of JP Morgan Chase. No. If they JP Morgan Chase wants to have their own private army, raise their own private army, they're welcome to do so. But we're not going to, I, on behalf of my constituencies, I'm not going to vote for more money to go to a property acquisition that JP Morgan Chase has in mind by force. You wouldn't fall in line with that if you had term limit. If John McCain had a term limit, first of all, he wouldn't get, Cindy McCain would not marry him. You see, another thing that happens when you have a term limit, nobody would, money will not marry into your house because they think you have political, they can sell you as a good political product. John McCain basically married Cindy McCain because Cindy McCain was looking for some political connection, and if she or her family was looking for some political connection, they saw the kid from a humble background, a war hero. They married their daughter to him, and then they sent him to Senate, and he stayed there for a lifetime. If there was term limits, he could have gone to Senate, but it wouldn't have been a life appointment. Just because, some of the richest family in Arizona back John McCain, so he had a lifetime appointment. If the richest people in the state own you, then they have means by which they can knock out any worthy opponent that comes up, either physically or reputation wise, or however necessary. And then you have a very rich political family. Salute. Ruling Arizona or voting on behalf of Arizonans for 50, 60 years in the Senate, however long he was a representative. My point is this: maybe he would still be a senator. What he would be? Senator McCain, who was a senator for 10 years, and it was over. After that, maybe the McCain family would, have a divorce from this gentleman and marry the next senator from Arizona. But you force rich people to, not think of who has political ambitions and political abilities, popularity wise, who has it, so let's let our family go into that family, and hopefully we have a politician in order to further our case, further our cause, further our profits. You wouldn't have that kind of calculations, those kind of marriages would not take place. And John McCain was basically as he was, a lifetime of a person from very humble beginnings, being impressed for a lifetime with things that he couldn't believe he would have access to one day. So he was very impressed. So he was impressed with the Cindy's family, and he was impressed with the halls of power in Washington D.C. And for a lifetime, he just was okay with funding more subduing of the natives over there on behalf of J.P. Morgan Chase, or other sisters of J.P. Morgan Chase, the biggest ones. I'm sure you can find one of them in the three biggest firms that own almost everything. They call them the three sisters. They're pushing for these wars because it's in their profit. You as a brown woman, and Mrs. Harris. Here's the thing: don't tell me Tulsi Gabbard is pro-war. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This lady was, the way I understand it, I may be wrong, was in charge of collecting body parts around battlefields. She was in charge of collecting bodies and body parts on occasion from around the battlefield of a foreign land which the natives were a foreign army was trying to subdue the natives in order to grab the land for, you know, Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America and, you know, State Street and others, Vanguard, State Street, and the other one. So my point is this, that she was collecting body and body parts for a few years, apparently, in Iraq. You can't tell me. The problem with Tulsi Gabbard is that she couldn't go native. She had seen bodies ripped apart, so she can't go native. When she arrived at the halls of power and saw some powerful women pushing the JP Morgan Chase agenda and the BlackRock agenda and the Vanguard and the State Street agenda of acquisition of more property by force, she was not impressed. She was not impressed with all the power and wealth that they were wielding, because those images from the front line is carved into her mind. She knows it's a crazy idea of acquisitioning land by force under some different pretext. Anglo-Saxons will come up with all kinds of pretexts to invade other people's lands and encourage other white people to invade other people's land. You know, Anglo-Saxons are encouraging the Ashkenazi to invade Arabian Peninsula. So here's the thing. I think, you know, the heart and soul of the Democratic Party should be Tulsi Gabbard and her line of thought. I have a feeling she's not very impressed with Israel either. It's just that that's such a powerful and wealthy individual who hold that stupid idea so near and dear that Tulsi Gabbard thinks she may actually be killed if she says otherwise in terms of Israel. But I think anybody with any kind of cognitive balance understands that you can't just house a bunch of Eastern Europeans in West Asia, not the way Westerners have go on, you know. Westerners can reside in Thailand. A lot of Westerners live in Thailand or other East Asian countries. But they don't demand their own gated community with their own air force and their own tanks and their own. No, if you're a white guy from England and go to Thailand, you have to melt into the society. You can't have your own police force or your own tank. That's the idea. What this solution to Israel is a very simple solution. That, hey, if you're from Poland and you go to Arabian Peninsula, you're going to be surrounded by a lot of Arabs. And no, you can't have your own colony, your own gated community. I call it a country. No, you can't have that, because this is Arabian Peninsula. It's not called Ashkenazi Peninsula. It's called Arabian Peninsula. So you have to be in a minority in Arabs, just like a British Christian goes and lives in Thailand and understands he's going to be a minority. At least now, they didn't. During what was colonialism? This was colonialism. That we grab a piece of your land and we want to be in the majority in this land, and we only want to rule ourselves. We don't want to be ruled by the natives. That's the whole point of a colony. We do not want to be ruled by the natives. That's the whole idea of, you know, white exceptionalism. That's the whole idea of racism. It's clearly a racist idea in Israel that is being implemented in 21st century. clearly a racist idea. We, the Ashkenazi, do not want to be integrated with the native Arabs. Well, sir, this is called Arabian Peninsula. If you don't want to intermingle with the Arabs because it's called Arabian Peninsula and you're always going to be in a minority. If you don't want to be with the Arabs, you go back to Europe. But over here, it's called Arabian Peninsula. All countries are Arabs. There is no Jewish state of Israel. Doesn't make any sense because it's called Arabian Peninsula. There's no Ashkenazi state of Israel. It's called Arabian Peninsula. Solution is very simple. Open the gates. Agree, accept to live in the minority if you're an Ashkenazi. Because you have moved to a place called Arabian Peninsula. Tulsi Gabbard, I believe she understands this, but she can't say it because, again, she wants to stay alive. So does JFK. I think, in fact, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, I think you have gone native. I think if it's been a year since Israelis have been bombing the shit out of the West Asians, the brown people, you could have performed a haka every day. It would have been 360 hakas by now, 365 hakas by now, demanding answers of why my constituency's money is being spent in West Asia bombing the natives. Why can't the Israelis open the gates and agree? Why can't the Ashkenazis open the gates and agree to live as a minority in Arabian Peninsula, which is a normal thing? If the Arabs go to Poland, they're going to be a minority in Poland. If the Polish people go to Arabian Peninsula, they're going to be a minority in Arabian Peninsula, and that means stop killing the natives. That's not hard to understand. But many people are scared, and if they actually want to stay relevant, they have to, say, okay, yeah, Ashkenazi, not Arabian Peninsula, but Ashkenazi Peninsula. But eventually, but here's the thing about Donald Trump, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, that I think you should agree with his suggestion of term limits, and as many people in Democratic Party should agree with that. Term limits makes sure that people who are really there to say something will get there, and then the term limits makes sure, like you and Mrs. Graney, but term limits makes sure that you and her, both of you, will remain true to your cause until the end of your term limit, and whoever comes next, they also have a lot of things they want to fix. And they come in and they remain true to their cause because there's a term limit. Because at one point they know they have to go and live with the muck. So they're going to try to clean the muck. Yeah, term limits. And I think, here's the thing, I think if there is anyone in this world that is used to taking the money and giving the middle finger, is Donald Trump. So I think the only one in the world that can actually, in the world that is within that sphere of influence, that who got elected, who was able to put himself into an election process and anyone within that sphere, if anybody can take people's money and give them the middle finger, is Donald Trump. Within that sphere of power and influence. And so if there is anybody who can take $100 million from Mrs. Adelson and then turn around and give her the middle finger and tell Israel that that's it, We're not financing a gated community of Europeans here anymore. You guys have to integrate with the native populations. Have a nice day. If you can't integrate with the native population, you must move back to Europe or North America. If anybody can do that within that sphere of power and influence, it would be Donald Trump. Because he's used to it. He's used to taking people's money and giving them the middle finger. He can give the middle finger to Mrs. Adelson. And he has taken 100 million again, as so many others have. Everybody is taking money from AIPAC and rich Ashkenazi who have these crazy ideas in mind about what the solar system is, what the Milky Way galaxy is, what is the whole universe. What are we? How are we? Specks of dust on the corners of the universe, and suddenly you feel special on it. There's some Ashkenazi that have some really bad ideas because of, again, the religion. You converted to the democratic religion almost as soon as you arrived. You fell in line with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the prophet of this religion at this time, has been for some time, because there are no term limits. The same thing with the Republican Party. The guy can no longer talk, but he's the boss, the prophet of the party. Boss, prophet, interchangeable in terms of religions, parties, political parties. McConnell, they put him on a buffer. They show him on a meme as buffering when he quiets down, but he can't be removed because there are no term limits, and he therefore, for being here so long, he has become a prophet. So now the prophet doesn't even work. His brain doesn't even work, and there are some JP Morgan people back there are paying some puppeteers to actually pull on their pants and finger their ass in order for the puppet to talk. Are you fucking kidding me? And these people have the same JP Morgan Chase, have the same control over the CIA and FBI. And you're okay with this, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez. And you're okay because you love your seat. As I said, like Kim Kardashian. You love your seat, and you see there's a chance that you can keep the seat for a lifetime and go to Skiff 5 times a week and hear of privileged information 5 times a week. And don't I feel so special? And if I just bend the knee to this religion and go with a lot of crazy shit, the religion will help me keep my seat, because I converted. They help me keep my seat for a lifetime, and for a lifetime I will be hearing privileged information. I'm sorry, ma'am. You've gone native. Perform a haka every morning until these wars stop. Watch that video every morning of that New Zealand girl who told white people the 10% upper echelon of white people in New Zealand to go fuck themselves. Watch that video every morning, so you have the audacity to go in front of the parliament and do the haka and give the middle finger to the prophets of the Democratic Party every morning until they change the fucking prophet, until they change their fucking manifesto, until we have the Democratic Party of the Woodstock. Are you fucking kidding me? The peace-loving Democratic, the ones who protested the Vietnam War, not the ones who are funding the Ukraine war. Yes, there are some good politicians that you will lose with term limits, but that's a good thing. They learn things, they travel, they learn new things, and now they go back to the society, to the muck, and now they're there doing their own thing with some better understanding of how government works. They can no longer hold that position, but they can maybe teach that position to other people. So other people who may get elected, when they come in, they know all the pitfalls, so the bureaucrats cannot run circles around them from day one. This is how you stay true to your cause if there are term limits. Tulsi Gabbard is not pro-war. Tulsi Gabbard was in charge of collecting bodies and body parts around the battlefield. She can never sell out. She can never go native because she knew it was wrong. Bad idea. Yeah, some people come from the military service even more gun-ho than they went in, and John McCain would be one of them, and Lindsey Graham would be another one. Some people are like this, but with term limits, you would get rid of them as well. Term limits. You don't want. I mean, yes, I think you should vote against your own interests in this case, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, and agree with term limits, because in the long run, term limits benefits your grandchildren. You see what I'm saying? In the long run, forget about yourself. Your grandchild may not be so lucky to hold on to your representative seat, so your grandchild is going to be part of the muck. If you and other sane people in the Democratic Party agree with other sane people in the Republican Party to term limits, then you will no longer see this rigid religion of the Democratic Party and Republican Party, it has become so rigid that they never think of changing their principles. They keep talking about who should we run next, who can relate better to the normal folks, to the muck, but we are not going to change our policies. How we can package our message better, who we should run next better, what color skin they should have, but they never think about changing the religion, because who changes the religion so often? That's it. The political party should not be a religion. You should be able to change your minds overnight. You call them flip-flops. Yes, flip-flop is great. If I think snakes are not thinking snakes are not poisonous, and having been bitten by a poisonous snake, of course I'm going to flip-flop my idea. I'm going to flip-flop on the idea that snakes are not poisonous because I got bit by one and it was poisonous. It's not. But the problem is, when you become part of a religion, you can't flip-flop. Even if the evidence is shooting you in the face, you're still not going to change because it has become a religion. This is the insanity part. Your political parties have become religions. They rather change the prophet, not even the prophets. The prophets stay. They rather change the messenger based on what color of skin they think will sell better. They rather change the packaging of the message, but never the message, never the action. No. The action is perfectly correct. This is what JP Morgan Chase asked of us. This is what we are providing for JP Morgan Chase. And we have to do that because JP Morgan Chase is paying our advertisement. paying for our advertisement campaign, paying for the JP Morgan Chase, Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez, apparently JP Morgan Chase, or money directed to your seat from JP Morgan Chase by the party, that you have become too dependent on that money apparently. So you have gone native, or at least, you know, you don't want to ruffle any feathers to have the protection of parties so you can keep your seat. Ma'am, you gotta watch the haka, a haka of that girl every morning, and go perform a haka and ask for Puerto Rico to become the 51st state, and ask for stopping sending these expensive missiles to conquer land for JP Morgan Chase, and spend instead, you have to vote for that money to instead go to your school system in your constituency. Schools, if they're bad, if they're not funded, any school can become a great school if they're funded very well. In order to fund the school very well, fund in terms of, you know, give me the kind of salary, teacher salary, that a doctor makes. Then you will get teachers as qualified as doctors. Let me repeat that again. I don't know what their salaries are, but if you give a salary of a doctor to a teacher, a lot of doctors would not want to be doctoring, would prefer to be teaching. So the kind of quality of teachers that you get is out of this world, is going to be out of this world. But that money has to stop funding missiles and start funding schools to pay their teacher extraordinarily well, so there would be a, you know, a nationwide competition to be a teacher. People would leave their engineer job and their medical job to become teachers because it's paid so well. It's one of the highest paid salaries, a third grade teacher. Tell me that you will not find a great mind who's not willing to get paid very well to teach third graders philosophy. You will. That money is right now going to conquer land in Ukraine for Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase. And you have gone native and you're quiet about it. Because you like your seat. I'm sorry, Tulsi Gabbard is right. Tulsi Gabbard is the correct Democratic Party. You're wrong. You should agree with term limits for the sake of your grandchildren. You should do your best, and then once you can no longer be re-elected, you go back to Bronx, I guess you are from, and open up an office to train the future candidates who are coming in with the short term as well, with the limited term as well, to train them in the pitfalls of the bureaucratic systems and whatever they want to implement, how the bureaucratic system is going to hinder their way to fixing anything. And so that when they come into the democratic system for their limited term as a representative or a senator, when they come in, they're already very familiar with every bureaucrat who can stall them. When they come in prepared, the bureaucrats cannot stall them to do whatever good they think they should be doing, because one day they have to go back to the muck. Please agree with limited terms. First, stop going native. Perform a haka every day. Agree with term limits for the sake of your grandkids. Maximum 2 terms. End. Max. and watch your democracy move in a positive direction, and these religions stop being, these political parties stop being religions. Religions are rigid. Religions can't change. They just seek more converts. You have to be able to change. And a lot of this money from, very rich people will not be coming in too much, because they can't buy people for life. And a lot of blackmail will not happen, because they would not be taking blackmail pictures from people for life. For example, if Bill Clinton had if the party in general had a term limit, imagine every 10 years all these people come together who just have had, the tent gets bigger because so many people have done the same job. Imagine they come together, and these people who have had the same jobs, every 5 years, every 6 years, there's a new representative. After 10 years, you have 6 people who have done the same job. Now these 6 people, imagine running a party and teaching the new people the pitfalls that the bureaucratic system is going to put them through. Please back Donald Trump for term limits. Please back Donald Trump for stopping these, expansion of the empire for JP Morgan Chase. Please stop going native. Stop. You have converted to the Democratic Party's religion. That's a bad idea. Although Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker of the House, but she's still sticking around. I mean, these prophets of the religion stay there until they die. That the lady, the Ashkenazi lady from California, who literally was, died in office apparently. Who, are you kidding me? Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in office. Folks, term limits makes people true to their cause, and usually cause of people you don't find any people who are newly arrived as corrupt. Let's put it this way. It takes time for the lobbyists to corrupt. It takes time for the newly arrived to be impressed. And if they see there's a chance for a lifetime appointment, they will bend the knee because they are impressed. Term limits is the only solution.